For 40 long years, the people of Israel lived under the heavy hand of the Philistines, their oppressors. These were difficult times, with no clear leader to guide the Israelites, no army to fight back, and no hope of deliverance. The Philistines, a fierce and powerful enemy, ruled over the land, exploiting the Israelites' resources. But God had not forgotten his people. He would raise up a deliverer. This time, it would not be through an army, but through one man, Samson. The story of Samson begins with his parents, Manoah and his wife. They lived in the land of Zorah, but they were childless. For years, they had prayed for a child, but it seemed their prayers would never be answered. One day, as Manoah's wife worked in the fields, a heavenly visitor appeared.
You will conceive a son, a Nazirite, dedicated to God, who will deliver Israel from the Philistines.
Stunned by the message, Manoah's wife hurried to find her husband.
A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel, and he told me we will have a son, one who will begin to save Israel.
Manoah, filled with both wonder and doubt, prayed to the Lord.
Lord, teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born.
And God answered his prayer. The angel returned and confirmed the instructions the child would be set apart as a Nazirite, someone dedicated to God, never to drink wine or touch anything unclean, and his hair must never be cut. In due time, the promised child was born, and they named him Samson, which means son. From an early age, it was clear that Samson was different. The Spirit of the Lord stirred within him, blessing him with extraordinary strength. As Samson grew into a young man, his strength became legendary. He could tear apart wild animals with his bare hands and defeat enemies effortlessly. But Samson, like any man, he was often driven by his own desires and impulses. One day, Samson traveled to the Philistine town of Timnah, where he saw a woman who captivated him. She was a Philistine, an enemy of his people, but that did not matter to Samson. He returned home and made a demand of his parents.
I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Get her for me as my wife.
Must you go to the Philistines? Are there no women among our own people?
She is the right one for me.
What Samson's parents did not know was that God was using this situation to create an opportunity against the Philistines. As Samson made his way back to Timnah to arrange his marriage, a lion suddenly charged at him from the vineyards. Without hesitation, Samson grabbed the lion with his bare hands and tore it apart. His incredible strength, fueled by the Spirit of the Lord. He continued on his way, saying nothing about the incident. Later, when he passed by the carcass of the lion, he found that a swarm of bees had made honey inside it. He scooped up some honey and ate it as he went along. He took some honey with him, sharing it with his parents, but telling them nothing about where it had come from. At the wedding feast in Timnah, Samson decided to challenge the Philistines with a riddle.
Let me tell you a riddle. If you can solve it within 7 days, I'll give you 30 sets of clothes. If you cannot, you must give me 30 sets of clothes.
The Philistines, confident in their cleverness, agreed.
Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet.
For 3 days, the Philistines struggled to solve the riddle, but none could. Frustrated and angry, they approached Samson's bride and threatened her.
Coax your husband to explain the riddle, or we will burn you and your father's house.
Fearful for her life, Samson's wife began to beg him to reveal the answer.
You hate me. You haven't told me the answer to your riddle.
For days, she pressed him until Samson, tired of her pleading, finally gave in.
The answer is, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?
Immediately, Samson's wife betrayed him, giving the answer to the Philistines. When they came to Samson with the solution, his anger flared.
If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle.
Samson went to a nearby town, killed 30 Philistines, and took their clothes to pay off his wager. When he returned, he discovered that his wife had been given to another man. Furious, Samson sought revenge once more. Samson's thirst for vengeance against the Philistines drove him to greater and greater acts of destruction. He caught 300 foxes, tied their tails together in pairs, and fastened torches to their tails. He set the foxes loose in the Philistines' fields, burning their grain, vineyards, and olive groves. The Philistines, enraged by the loss, came after Samson, but he was not afraid. He fought them fiercely, and when they attacked him at Lehi, the Spirit of the Lord once again came powerfully upon him. Using the jawbone of a donkey, Samson struck down 1,000 Philistines in one battle. As he stood amidst the bodies of his enemies, he said, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." Samson's strength had made him a hero to the Israelites, but it had also made him the most hated enemy of the Philistines. Yet despite all his victories, his greatest battle was still to come, not against the Philistines, but against his own heart. As time passed, Samson's weakness for Philistine women would again lead him down a dangerous path. In the valley of Sorek, he fell in love with a woman named Delilah. She was beautiful and captivating, but she was also treacherous. The Philistine rulers offered Delilah a great sum of money if she could discover the secret of his strength. Delilah accepted the offer and began her deceit.
Tell me, Samson, what is the secret of your great strength?
If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man.
But when the Philistines came upon him, Samson easily broke the bowstrings and defeated them.
You have made a fool of me. Tell me how you can be bound.
Samson continued to deceive her, saying he could be bound with new ropes or if his hair were woven into a loom. But each time, Samson broke free, defeating the Philistines.
You don't love me. You haven't told me the truth about your strength.
Day after day, she nagged him until, weary and frustrated, Samson gave in.
No razor has ever touched my head. If my hair is cut, I will lose my strength and become as weak as any other man.
That night, as Samson slept, Delilah cut his hair. When he awoke, the Philistines were upon him, but this time his strength had left him. They seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him to Gaza, where they bound him in bronze shackles and forced him to grind grain in the prison. Samson's strength had left him, and he was now a prisoner in the hands of his enemies. The Philistines celebrated their victory, praising their god Dagon for delivering their enemy into their hands. But Samson was not forgotten by God. His hair began to grow back. One day, the Philistines gathered in their temple to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon. The temple was packed with men and women, all eager to mock Samson. They called for him to be brought out to entertain them. As Samson was led to the center of the temple, he asked the servant to place his hands on the pillars.
Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes.
With renewed strength from God, Samson pushed with all his might, and the pillars gave way. The temple collapsed, killing Samson and everyone inside, including the Philistine rulers. In his death, Samson had destroyed more Philistines than he had during his life. Samson's final act was a victory for Israel, but it was also a story of redemption and sacrifice. Samson's life was one of great triumphs and deep failures. He was a man chosen by God to deliver Israel, gifted with extraordinary strength. But he was also a man of weaknesses, prone to anger, driven by desire. Yet in his final moments, Samson turned to God, and through his last act, he fulfilled his divine calling. Samson's story is a reminder that even in our weaknesses, God can work through us. Samson's strength lay not in his hair, but in his faith. Even in his lowest moment, God used him to bring deliverance to his people.